I never really believed in Bigfoot. I'm sure you hear that all the time. Growing up in western Pennsylvania, we heard the stories. Shadowy shapes in the woods, eerie howls at night, footprints where no man should have been walking barefoot. But like most people, I figured it was just old hunters trying to keep kids from trespassing, or drunks telling tales by the fire. That changed in October of 2018. At the time, I was working for a local environmental group doing conservation work in some of the reclaimed wilderness areas. One such place was Dead Man's Hollow, an old industrial site turned nature preserve near the river. A lot of folks said the place was haunted. Supposedly, people died there in the steel mill days, and hikers reported strange lights and whispers. Honestly, I thought it was just urban legend wrapped in campfire smoke. That Saturday started normal enough. I was alone, hiking deep into the hollow to check on some camera traps we had set up along some game trails. It was late afternoon. The sky was gray and heavy, and the wind was sharp with that dying leaves smell. I didn't bring a gun. I didn't think I needed one. Just my pack, my tools, and my GPS. By the time I reached the third camera, things felt off. The woods had gone too quiet. No bird song, no squirrels chittering, not even the drone of distant highway traffic. Just my own breath and the crunch of leaves under my boots. Then I noticed the smell. It hit like a wet sack of roadkill. Something rotten, sour, and musky all at once. I thought maybe I'd stumbled on a dead deer. That's when I saw the first footprint. It was in the mud next to the stream. Bigger than my boot by a long shot, maybe 17 inches long, broad at the heel, toes splayed wide. No shoe tread, just skin, toes, and deep impressions, like something heavy had come through. I told myself it was a bear, a big one. I even laughed out loud to break the tension, but the hairs on my neck were not buying it. I kept moving, got to the camera, swapped the card, turned to head back, and froze. Across the stream, maybe 50 yards up the slope, stood something watching me. Tall, broad, covered head to toe in dark, matted hair. It wasn't a bear. It stood upright, shoulders slumped forward, arms long enough that its fingertips brushed its thighs. The head sat low between the shoulders, and even from that distance, I could see the eyes, deep set, dark, and fixed right on me. For what felt like a full minute, neither of us moved. My brain couldn't process it fast enough. Fight, flight, freeze, all tangled up inside of me. Then it huffed. Not a growl, not a roar, a short, sharp breath, like a grunt of warning. It turned, melted into the undergrowth, and was gone. I didn't run, not at first. I walked, fast but careful, trying not to trip or make a noise. Once I hit the old access road, I broke into a sprint. Back at my truck, I sat there with the doors locked, shaking until the sky went fully dark. I still had to drive out of those woods. Every shadow looked alive. The kicker? When we pulled the SD card from that camera the next week, the last photos showed deer, raccoons, the usual. Then one shot, just after 4:30 p.m., of something tall, hairy, and humanoid, stepping through the trees. Blurry, sure, but unmistakable. I quit that job a month later. I haven't been back to Dead Man's Hollow since. And I believe now. I believe that something is out there. I grew up in rural Washington, just outside of a town called Morton, right on the edge of the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. My family owned a little cabin up near Elk Creek, deep enough in the woods that cell service was non-existent, and the closest neighbor was about half-mile through dense timber. That cabin was my dad's pride, hand-built by him and his brother in the late 70s, back when they logged these woods. When he passed away, the place sat empty for years until I decided to clean it up and use it as a weekend getaway spot. This happened in September of 2020, just after Labor Day. I'd gone up alone to do some repairs. The first couple of days were uneventful. Mornings spent patching the roof, afternoons fishing Elk Creek. At night, I'd sit on the porch, drink a beer, listen to the frogs and owls, and feel a kind of peace I hadn't known for years. But on the third night, something changed. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps, heavy ones circling the cabin. Not a deer, not with that weight. Every few seconds, the steps would stop. Then I'd hear this low, rasping breath through the cracks in the log walls. It just sounded wrong. Too big to be human, but too deliberate to be an animal. I grabbed my flashlight and crept to the window. I didn't want to shine the light at first. Part of me thought maybe it was a bear, and blinding it would just make things worse. But when the steps circled around to the front porch, I lost my nerve. I flipped on the light. Nothing, just empty porch boards swaying trees beyond. I stayed up till dawn with my shotgun across my lap. The steps didn't come back. The next day, I found the footprints in the dirt by the woodpile. Long, bare feet, wide as dinner plates, toes splayed deep into the mud. Whatever made them had stood there watching me through the window for God knows how long. I should have packed up right then, but stubbornness kept me there. I told myself it was just a bear, or maybe some hiker pulling a prank. That night it returned. Same time, just past 2 a.m. Same steps circling, slow. But this time, it didn't stop at the porch. It came up to the steps. Boards groaned under its weight. Something leaned against the door. Not pounding, just pressing, testing it. I sat there in the dark, shotgun aimed at the knob, heart hammering. Then came a sound I'll never forget. A hand, 5 fingers, slowly dragging across the wood grain of the door, nails scratching, testing, almost curious. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just waited, barely breathing. After what felt like forever, it gave this low, guttural chuff, almost like a laugh, and stepped back down. The next morning, I found handprints on the door, huge, smudged in dirt, fingers as thick as sausages, nails like black claws. I packed up and I have not been back since. About 6 months later, I told this story to an old logger at a diner in Morton. He didn't laugh, just said, "That thing's been up there longer than we have, and you were lucky. It just wanted to look." Back in the summer of 2004, 3 friends of mine, Paul, Randy, and Mike, decided to take a week-long backcountry trip into the mountains of Arkansas. They were all seasoned outdoorsmen, ex-military, hunters, no-nonsense types. They weren't out there for ghost stories or thrills. They wanted to fish, hike, and camp far away from anyone. They hiked in about 12 miles to a ridge known as Lonesome Ridge, a remote place with no cell service, no traffic noise, no people for miles. It's a stretch of wilderness known for black bear and the occasional cougar. What it's not known for is Bigfoot, or at least that's what they thought. The first couple of nights went fine. Campfire, whiskey, good laughs. But on the third night, things went sideways. They settled into their tents. Fire burned down to coals. Around 3 a.m., Randy woke up to something moving through their camp. Not a raccoon, not a deer, something big, heavy, and slow. He said he could hear it breathing. He sat up and unzipped the tent quietly and shone his light toward the noise. Just at the edge of the light stood a figure. Massive, maybe 8 to 9 feet tall, covered in thick dark hair. Shoulders were broader than any man, and its face wasn't human. Deep-set eyes, flat nose, wide mouth. It stood there staring back at him like it had no fear at all. Randy yelled. The others woke up fast. Paul grabbed his rifle and stepped out. The creature didn't flinch. It huffed a deep, chesty sound, then turned and walked off into the tree line. They didn't sleep for the rest of the night. At first, they found tracks, circling the tent, by the fire pit, even near where their food had hung, and they were huge and barefoot. They decided to cut the trip short, packed up fast, and that's when they realized they weren't alone. As they hiked out, something paralleled them, just off the trail, hidden in the dense woods. They could hear it breaking branches, breathing, moving when they moved. Sometimes they caught glimpses between the trunks. A tall, dark shape, always staying just out of full sight. Then it got bold. Rocks started flying. Big ones. Not rolling down the hill. These were being thrown. Crashing through the trees, landing near their feet, forcing them to pick up their pace. Mike nearly got his head split open by one the size of a softball. The creature, or creatures, because now they were starting to think there was more than just one, shadowed them for 4 miles, never revealing themselves fully, never getting closer than a few dozen yards, but never letting them leave its woods in peace. The final straw came at a narrow crossing where the trail skirted a steep ravine. As they hesitated, figuring out the safest route, a log, a full-sized rotted log, came crashing down from the slope above. Not rolled, thrown. That's when Paul raised his rifle and fired 2 warning shots into the trees. Whatever was up there gave this horrific, guttural scream. This was not a bear. This was not a man. But it finally retreated into the deeper woods. They made it back to their truck shaking and silent. None of them have been back since. Paul told me this story years later, and I asked him flat out, "Do you really believe it was Bigfoot?" He didn't blink at me. He didn't smile at me. He just said, "What else could it have been?" This story was told to me by Quinault Elder, when I worked briefly on a forestry project in Washington state. The tribe has lived in those forests for untold generations, and they don't call it Bigfoot. They call it the Watchers, or the Hidden People. He told me this story quietly, not like a tale for tourists, but like something serious, something true. Noah's grandfather, back in the 1940s, was a young man living near Lake Quinault. Like all the men then, he hunted, fished, and respected the land. One autumn, he took his canoe far upriver, higher than usual, into thick cedar forest where even their people rarely went. He was following elk tracks, planning to camp for a few nights alone. On his second night, just before dark, he noticed something strange. No birds, no insects, not even frogs. Just a heavy silence pressing on the forest. That's when he smelled it. Wet fur, earth, and something sour. He didn't light a fire. Instinct told him not to. As he lay in his blanket under a lean-to, he heard something walking around. Slow, deliberate, and heavy. He stayed still. He said a prayer. Sometime past midnight it spoke. Not words, not human speech. A kind of deep-throated, rumbling chatter, like two rocks grinding together. It circled 3 times, then moved off into the darkness. At dawn, he found footprints around his camp. Huge and barefoot. Like a man's, but wrong somehow. Wider. With large toes. He backed up. He didn't hunt. And he paddled home fast. When he told the old people what had happened, they nodded. They knew. They said, "You went too high. That was the Watchers. You went too far. That is their place, not ours." They explained something he'd never known. The Watchers aren't animals. They're not bears, they're not apes. They're just the Watchers of the mountains, the keepers of balance. They don't bother you unless you forget to show respect, unless you take too much, stay too long, or think that the forest belongs to you. He wasn't afraid after that. He understood. He taught his children and his grandchildren how to behave in the deep woods. Leave offerings. Never mock the unseen. Never whistle after dark. And if you smell wet fur and silence falls around you, leave quietly and respectfully. They were here before us, he'd say. They'll be here after we're gone.